So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the kind introduction. Yes, Richard Traherne, Chief Commercial Officer of Cambridge Consultants, based in the UK. So I'd like to start by thanking the UKTI for the very kind invitation to speak this afternoon, and of course also to Tokyo Corporation for the kind sponsorship for the event. So to explain my title, Chief Commercial Officer means driving the innovation strategy that we develop with our clients now globally, and also driving the long-term strategic growth of our client relationships. We tend to have very long, 10, 20-year relationships with the clients that we work with. And Japan is a very special focus for us in Asia. For two primary reasons. One, because we see a very strong business affinity with the Japanese companies that we work with. We see a very strong innovation drive in Japan, a very strong interest in innovation, primarily to stimulate economic growth. And we find a very strong fit in the way that we do business and our business model, because our business is all about helping companies to commercialize technology and derive a business return. So in the last couple of years, we've set up an office in Tokyo, and I'd like to introduce Saso-san, who's stood at the side of the room. He heads up our Japanese activity, and Dr. Miles Upton, who's stood by Saso-san, who heads up our Asia capability in general. And by the way, if after the presentation you're interested in any more information, there is a brochure that you can pick up from the table. And this week we're actually running two innovation seminars of our own. We were very kindly hosted at the British Embassy by UKTI yesterday in Tokyo, and then we have one in Osaka tomorrow, and I see a few people in the audience who I recognise are coming to that. So, onto the title of the talk this afternoon, Smart Innovation, the Keys to Sustainable Growth. What do I mean by that? I think it's fair to say that there isn't a company or government or nation in the world that isn't interested in innovating, but we all know it's very difficult. In practice, the competitive landscape for innovating is tough. That competition requires everybody to differentiate more and more and to seek out the innovations that are going to be a real commercial success. And so that is essentially the theme for the presentation this afternoon. I'm going to break it down into 6 sections. So first of all, just 3 very quick slides and then a short video about us, really just to set some quick context. Then I'd like to talk about the Cambridge High Tech Cluster briefly. It's been introduced already today. And then talk about this increasing pace of innovation and what that means for companies who are looking to be truly innovative. And then I'm going to touch on 6 themes, which are innovation themes that we see across our global client base of companies that we work with, who we are helping to innovate in different ways. And these are key themes that we think transcend all of the markets and technology areas that we work in. And finally, some key takeaways at the end. So first of all, we are a product and service development company. Companies use us to solve a business problem of some kind with a technology solution. So whether that's breaking into a new market or technology area, whether it's solving a tough technical problem, whether it's producing a new innovation to offset competition, our customers use us to come up with some sort of technical solution to solve that problem. And our name is a bit misleading. We're not consultants in the typical sense. Actually, 95% of our staff are scientists or engineers. So we help our clients to identify the solution and then create it. We've been doing that for 55 years, and we have a track record of world firsts. So here we have, on the left, this was the world's first single-chip CMOS Bluetooth ASIC, and that enjoyed 70% market share. In the middle, we have a wireless defibrillator, so a pacemaker for use inside the body, again, a world first. And on the right, we have a global satellite communication system, which was a world first in allowing people to have a walkie-talkie style satellite communication radio where you could talk to anyone, anywhere on the planet within half a second of pressing the button. In terms of clients, we have clients globally, and they range from small startups that have an idea, and we help them to incubate that idea and develop it into a commercial realization, all the way through the largest multinationals. And you'll see customers Hitachi, Asahi there in the list. In fact, we were very grateful to have Hitachi as a speaker at our innovation event yesterday and also tomorrow. And we're working with Hitachi to help them develop a new radical innovation program for their organization globally. We also, it was interesting to note the comments earlier about the catapults. We also are working with the new energy catapult with an Energy Technology Institute for a new home automation system. In terms of sites, we have our headquarters in Cambridge. That, of course, was our birthplace. We have another R&D centre in Boston, and then we have our regional offices in Tokyo, Singapore, and New Delhi. And on the next slide, I'm going to start a short video. It's going to show you some of the people, facilities, and tools that we have at Cambridge Consultants. I apologise in advance because it has some very rapid English, which I appreciate will not be easy to read as it flashes up. But hopefully it'll give you a virtual tour of Cambridge Consultants. Okay, so thank you for watching that. That was a virtual tour, if you like, of Cambridge Consultants. And I'd like to pick out one theme that was highlighted by several of our presenters this morning, which was cross-fertilisation of ideas. So, hopefully you recognised a number of different market areas and technology areas, and one of the strongest themes that we see is the cross-fertilisation of ideas between them to create breakthroughs. So onto the Cambridge High Tech Cluster. So this is an aerial view of the original Science Park in Cambridge. That's our campus, and the earlier presenters talked about some of the statistics for the UK, and if we drill down one level, Cambridge has the highest VC per capita now in Europe. The university itself, which has been around for 800 years, so deserves a solid place in Cambridge history, has raised more VC than any other European university, and to put that into context, has raised a similar amount of VC to the top 5 US universities combined. As an organisation ourselves, within Cambridge there have been 15 $1 billion capitalisation companies created, and 4 of those 15 were actually spin-outs of Cambridge Consultants. And we have global associations now through certainly the UKTI, Cambridge Network, and other organisations like Cambridge Wireless in particular sectors. And I would reinforce the messages earlier that for us, the ecosystem of companies, support, the associations, the fabrication and engineering support companies that exist in the cluster are an absolutely key ingredient of the cluster, as well as the mobility of staff and ideas. So again, that cross-fertilisation. To put that into perspective, here are some of the companies that we've spun out, as well as companies that have spun out through individuals who have left Cambridge Consultants. The $4 billion capitalisation companies are highlighted in blue. And this was a diagram constructed by Cambridge University's Judge Institute, the Management Institute, who traced the Cambridge cluster back to two nuclei. One was Cambridge University and the other was Cambridge Consultants, as you see in this diagram. And more broadly, a number of international organisations have based themselves with R&D capabilities in Cambridge. So here we have Bill Gates. In 1997, he chose the UK as his first country outside the US to invest in R&D. And also, in terms of Japan links, we have Hitachi, Toshiba, and others who are establishing R&D linkages in the area. So on to the increasing pace of innovation. Just a few examples, really. So, if we look at some of the sectors that we work in, so in automotive, we take the BMW example. From 18 new models introduced in 2008 to 36 in 2016, and BMW needed help in managing to create that level of variation in its product categories and roadmap. At the same time to market reducing from 51 months in 1990 to 23 months in 2010. So doing more in less time. Same thing with smartphones. 5-6 years ago, the trend was to reduce the number of product variants. But of course, now with emerging markets and other influences, that trend is reversing. And then finally to potentially a market that might be deemed slightly more conservative, geostationary satellite, where lead time for development reducing from 33 months in 2010 to 20 months in 2015. And then another major effect is market disruption. So companies who are not traditional in that market entering the market with radical effect. So here we have Tesla, who of course made their name with vehicles and in particular techniques for harvesting energy and their battery technologies. And here a concept where they're taking that technology, transferring it into home energy storage. And of course Elon Musk behind that. We know he's a true global innovator with PayPal, SpaceX and Tesla itself. So what about a more conservative market? So let's pick medical. So in medical, we see people like Apple producing Google Health, and then for their power user base, the newer research kit, which allows Apple to run clinical trials of a sort with their power user group. And then IBM entering the market with physician decision-making, so again, transferring their knowledge to a new area. And here we have their Watson physician assistant based on their supercomputing strength. Sony, so taking their optical disc technology and now moving that into the diagnostic sector, so introducing radically new techniques for them, microfluidics, and making a solution in diagnostics. So all of these things, when you combine that with the climate in Japan at the moment, where many of our customers are telling us that they need to innovate, they want to innovate radically, which translates as we need significant new business streams in the next few years, and they need to do it quickly. This is providing quite a strong impetus behind the revival techniques of introducing new product categories, expanding roadmaps, and expanding business. So one sort of interesting statistic I saw, and again, as an earlier presenter said, it's always difficult to pick a measure of innovation, and I would certainly not suggest that patent generation is a clear winner in that respect. But Thomson Reuters do, I think, a good job of looking at patent quality. So they have a variety of measures to look at the commercialization aspect of patents. And they put Japan at the top at the moment, which is quite a startling figure because many of our customers deem themselves to be not innovative. And when we go in and look at the raw capabilities within each of our Japanese customers, we see a lot of innovation. It's not necessarily accessible to the organization, but a lot of innovation within the people that they employ. And then, in that study, the Thomson Reuters also identified a very high proportion of Japanese companies who were new entrants, who slightly more disruptive in their nature, entering the survey in this year. So if we move on to innovation themes, so at the start I said these are some of the very, very high-level themes, so we're not going to dive into too much technical detail, but some of the high-level themes that we see across the companies that we work with. So first of all, convergence of markets and technologies, and I've touched on this already. These happen to be the areas of business that we work primarily in. And as you can see, each are very diverse. Each have different technology backgrounds. Each have very different flavors of the way that you develop a product in those markets. But what we're seeing are new categories like connected health, where we combine our medical technology expertise, developing to ISO 13485 standards in a particular way with our wireless telecommunications expertise. And of course, security is a key aspect, so we work with a variety of governments around the world developing security solutions, so we introduce that into the overall answer. And then, of course, with digital health, the solutions are steadily moving towards the home and the patient, so you have to have a consumer product approach to developing many of the products rather than the clinical approach or hospital-based approach that we traditionally have used. Taking another example, home and building automation, where Cambridge Consultants, we combine our industrial skills with consumer skills because these are sensing technologies in the home, typically, again with security. And then finally, an interesting example that came up recently was an underwater sensor that spends most of its life at the bottom of the ocean measuring pressure, suddenly translating into new gaming technology to allow the motion of a person's hand and gesture recognition to be detected. So we have a phrase in Cambridge Consultants which is the innovation happens in the gaps. And what I mean by that is if you look at the white spaces on this chart, they're actually the interesting areas of innovation at the moment. And then if we look at skills, again, just for an example, I'm putting up on the screen here the skills that we have at Cambridge Consultants, and each of the companies in the audience, you'll have your own respective skills. And the same thing applies, it is that combination of skills. And the great thing from a business perspective is that if you can combine a large number of deep expertise together, it will help your differentiation, because it's very unlikely that another organisation in the world will have that same combination of skills. So we always look to try to introduce a sensible aspect of multidisciplinary capability to really anything that we do, to stimulate innovation and, again, that cross-fertilisation. On to platform innovation. So what do I mean by that? So platform innovation for us is about innovating with a roadmap of exploitation in mind. So you invest once and you recoup the return multiple times. And that obviously has a commercial return on investment benefit. Of course, you have to retain that value focus rather than technology focus. So, always looking at the commercial return, not the technology drive. But some of the other benefits are that the staged investment reduces the risk in highly competitive and rapidly changing markets. And what I mean by that is it's rarely clear at the outset, the precise definition of the solution or the product or the service that you're trying to develop. So what you need to do, in our opinion, is to keep your options open so that you can address the market in the most appropriate way at the earliest time. So it's very much a startup mentality. Startups often bootstrap their businesses into existence through taking early opportunities, which may not be the end goal, but they serve a purpose in injecting money into the equation. And then that, of course, allows flexibility in exploitation. So you have the flexibility to begin with, and then if you've got your roadmap right, you have multiple opportunities to use that core technology. So as a quick example, Iridium Communications is one of our customers. We develop the satellite handsets on the ground, we develop the protocols up to the satellites, and we also develop the telecoms infrastructure on the ground. And we took a roadmap approach in the early days when we started working with Iridium back in 2003. Our first product was a handset. But at that time, we knew that Iridium needed a more advanced, modern handset in the future period. So we developed the platform to allow that to grow. But more significantly, we also developed it so that the satellite brains of the handset, the technology that allowed the handset to communicate with the satellites, could be extracted as a module. So a very similar concept to the cellular mobile telecommunications world. And what that allowed Iridium to do was to take their professional industrial product, shrink it down to a modem, and then take it to an entirely new product category area, so consumer devices. So here is a prosumer device for people that enjoy hiking, with emergency functionality and all of the things that you would want if you had a problem up a mountain. Same technique in a different area, into conservation. So another of our customers is the Zoological Society London, one of the oldest conservation organisations in the world, and they wanted to monitor wildlife through the satellite system wherever it was in the world. And this was a great project. We developed the system for them, and the end customer, in fact, was the Duke of Cambridge. So Prince William, who here with his father, Prince Charles, was having a demo of the system at one of the early stages. The project was partly funded by the wedding fund of Prince William and Kate, which went into black rhino conservation. The project also won a Google Global Impact Award for the good that it did to the conservation community. So on to science-led innovation, where, particularly in the consumer product area, we see a lot of blue sky innovation occurring. And I think for many organisations, we look at that as a very good thing. But taken to the extreme, it can lack a scientific analytical approach. And if you want to be number one, the best in your market area, you've got to have a scientific analytical approach so that you develop the very best that you can, even in a consumer style area. So I'm going to use a very simple example, but one that's close to the hearts of everyone in England, and I think everyone in Japan too, of tea. And of course, in both countries, we have a lot of tradition in how we make tea, and we have our own personal idea of the perfect cup of tea. So we set out to develop a machine that could produce that perfect cup of tea. And we considered all of the parameters that you would imagine. So tea leaf size, temperature, the temperature profile, pressures, water qualities. And we came up with the formula through a lot of study to allow us to create a perfect process. And that ended up being produced in a final product that looked like this in a capsule. So this effectively was award-winning tea in a fraction of the time and inconvenience of the manual process. And then finally, digital services. So digital services is a very hot trend area for many of our customers, typically customers who have developed devices or products in the past, and they want to embrace the new digital world and also new service revenue streams. And so it introduces complications to traditional businesses because this is a very new style of business. It's a very new style of technology. It requires typically IoT aspects. It requires back-end infrastructure. It requires ways of communicating and sensing to the real world. And so the example that I'm showing here is a device that we developed for a range of clients. It's the blue device on the left, which essentially is a very, very simple device. It's a 3-axis accelerometer that measures vibration. And you can see its position on a windscreen. And what we found that we could do with suitable maths behind that was to identify a range of different scenarios for the car. So here on the left you can see the algorithms are able to detect very successfully the engine starting, the doors opening and closing, if the car hits the curb, strong braking, or a rear shunt, so a collision on the rear of the vehicle. In the diagram you can also see some notes. You can tell which cylinders are firing and what gear you're in. So a huge amount of data from a tremendously simple device, in fact a device that's less sophisticated than the device in your mobile phone likely in your pocket. Here's another view of some of those conclusions drawn out through the maths. And what we found was that we're working with a range of customers. I'm using here the example of car insurance companies who are extremely interested in this to allow them to do the vehicle telematic situation, but in a much simpler, much cheaper, and much more innovative way. And so here, extracting data about the driving conditions out to a mobile phone. And what that's allowing those businesses to do is to touch their customers in a very different way, and also provide an entirely different business model. So it's radically shaking up the industry, and will have a very great effect in other industries as well. So finally, just some quick takeaways. So I think the first is this aspect of cross-fertilization. Due to the competition, due to that competitive landscape, if you really want to succeed and be number one, you have to have cross-fertilization, whether that's moving people around in your organization, if you're large enough to have sites around the world, moving them around sites, open innovation, including innovation from other organizations, partner organizations, consultancies, moving the ideas that you see in one market area into another. So all of those aspects are extremely important, we believe, in what we see across our customer base. And then technology clusters, because having a focus around the mobility and the assets and the capital and the investment and the human resource that you can collect together is extremely important. In Cambridge, we find that to be a vital part of our existence, and actually that's now growing in Boston. And when we develop our capabilities in Asia further and in Japan, that will be a key ingredient that we're looking for. And then finally, the themes. We find it extremely useful to take our customers through a range of themes, like the ones that I've just described, to allow them to think about how these top-level themes that are already proving to be successful and lucrative in other markets can be applied to their businesses. So with that, any questions?
Hi, ありがとうございます。Thank you very much. And